We are 8 undergraduate students at the John Wesley Honors College of Indiana Wesleyan University, taking part in a research tutorial focusing on platonizing Christians, members of the church who were heavily influenced by Plato and Gnostic literature. Led by Christian origin scholar Christian Askeland, we spent a semester exploring the Gnostic Gospel of Judas. To better understand this controversial text, we researched several early Christian writers, Platonism, and Gnostic literature, trying to unravel the Gospel of Judas's influencing forces. This documentary represents some of our findings, expounded through exposition and dramatization with some help from some fellow students. The John Wesley Honors College now presents the Gospel of Judas.
In 180 AD, Christian philosopher Irenaeus condemned the Gnostic Gospel of Judas as heresy, but for centuries, his words were the only evidence of the mysterious manuscripts. At the time, Gnostic Gospels were plentiful and kept alongside other Gospels and letters that are now included in the Christian canon. Such Gnostic manuscripts, including the Apocryphon of John, the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Philip, were later deemed heretical. For centuries, scholars have scrutinized the writings and their unique ideologies and cosmologies within. But the Gospel of Judas, an alleged key to understanding Gnosticism and its relation to Christianity, had only existed as rumor. That is, until the mid-1970s, when an Egyptian farmer found a codex which contained the mysterious gospel. Thus began the long and complicated journey of the Gospel of Judas towards reconstruction, translation, and interpretation. But experts soon discovered that the text requires interpretation beyond translation. The Gospel of Judas presents an account of secret conversations between Jesus Christ and his infamous disciple, Judas Iscariot, and these documented conversations provide more questions than answers. With the help of ancient philosophers, early Christian writers, and other Gnostic texts, we will shed light upon the mysteries within the Gospel of Judas. Who was Judas Iscariot? Can Christians receive salvation? Was Jesus the descendant of Barbelo? And who keeps a manuscript in a freezer?
During the 1970s, an Egyptian peasant farmer discovered the ancient book called a codex in a tomb in the deserts of Jebel Kahara. Not knowing what it said, but realizing its potential value, the poor farmer sold it to an antiquities dealer in Cairo named Hannah Asable. Hannah recognized that the codex was a valuable ancient artifact, but he could not read it because it was written in Coptic, an ancient Egyptian form of writing which used the Greek alphabet and a few additional characters. Keeping the codex in his personal safe, Hannah only showed it to select customers such as the well-known antiquities dealer Nicholas Koudalakis. Koudalakis, however, did not speak Arabic, so when he visited Hannah in the late 1970s, he brought along a young woman named Mia as his interpreter. Seizing an opportunity to cut Koudalakis out of the deal, Hannah approached Mia and offered to sell his wares directly through her. She obliged, bringing a client who, after examining Hannah's entire inventory, agreed to buy everything in the shop at list price. Too overjoyed to recognize the dubious nature of the deal, Hannah went home a happy man. That is until he returned to the shop the next morning and found it completely empty. His entire stock, including the codex, had been stolen in the middle of the night. From Cairo, the codex, along with Hannah's other possessions, disappeared to the dark side of the antiquities market, ending up somewhere in Greece, most likely Athens. During this time, the furious Hannah enlisted the help of Nicholas Koudalakis, yes, the same man whom he cheated out of a sale, and Yanis Perdios, a Greek associate of both parties. Perdios and Koudalakis undertook the search for Hannah's possessions, scouring the antiquities market until they discovered that Jack Ogden, a well-respected gem specialist, had obtained some of the goods. Flying to Ogden's home in London in 1982, Perdios and Koudalakis' son confronted Ogden, who had no idea that the items had been stolen. The squeaky clean scholar had no desire to be caught with sordid stolen antiquities, so he readily surrendered them to his angry visitors. After retrieving Hannah's stolen goods, Perdios and Koudalakis met with Hannah in Koudalakis' home in Geneva, where they negotiated the return of Hannah's property. Following the meeting, Perdias spoke with Hannah, convincing him to store the codex in Switzerland in the security of a safe deposit box in a Swiss bank. Perdias then contacted Ludwig Kernen, a papyrologist, and Frieda Chakas Nussberger, an artifacts dealer based in Switzerland, sending them photographs of the codex. Kernen took an eager interest in the photos, and he assembled a team of experts who flew to Geneva to examine the codex in 1983. Among them was Stephen Emmel, a Coptic expert who retells the story.
It was wrapped up in newspaper. I had to kneel on the floor next to the bed to look at mine because I was the youngest. The other two got to stand up and use a table in the room and the bureau. And I was very glad I brought my flat-headed tweezers with me because I could see immediately that the papyrus was quite fragile. I worked with literally thousands of pieces of papyrus in my time, and I knew that if I were to handle that with my fingers, it would be very easy to break pieces loose. In fact, the material was so fragile, and that's not always the way it is with papyri. Some papyri are remarkably firm and strong, even being thousands of years old. It depends a lot, I think, on the kinds of conditions that the papyrus has been through over the centuries and millennia. But this was very obviously very fragile papyrus, and so I was not ready to do any more than lift a couple of pages up and peek in. I didn't dare to turn any pages. I could only open as though you're opening a book just a couple of centimeters and looking in from the side to see what you can see. This looks very much like a typical Coptic literary codex from the 4th or the 5th century. I had no doubt whatsoever that it was genuine, and because it contained at least one Gnostic codex, also if not entirely unique, a very rare specimen, and so certainly it's worth buying. And beyond that of the codex, I was able to read parts of the text, and it was clearly a dialogue between Jesus and some of his disciples. The name Judas occurred quite a number of times, and I was pretty familiar at that time with the literature of that genre, post-resurrection dialogues between Jesus and his disciples. And I knew that it wasn't the dialogue of the Savior or the Sophia, the wisdom of Jesus Christ, known from the Mahdi text. So it wasn't a text that was known to me, and I assumed provisionally that it was a new text of that genre. And although I considered the possibility it might be the Gospel of, not the Gospel of Judas, I considered the possibility that Judas might be Judas Iscariot, but that was statistically very unlikely, because when Judas occurs in one of these Gnostic revelation dialogues, it's almost always Judas Thomas, twin of Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas, for example. I wasn't able to see the title, the Gospel of Judas, which would have been of some decisive importance, because the title is written on the backside of a page, what we call the versa. And in order to have seen that, I would have had to have turned that page completely. And because of the condition of the manuscript, I simply was not going to do that. I didn't want to cause any more damage. Well, we were given altogether about 15 minutes, I would say, to examine the material before the owner wanted to begin talking price. And because Professor Kernan knew the man already from previous meetings, we had agreed that he would be the one to conduct the negotiations. So for some privacy, he and the owner went into the hotel room bathroom and came out about 5 minutes later. And I could tell immediately from the look on Kernan's face that the negotiations had not gone anywhere. He was extremely disappointed and was telling the man in Arabic that it was simply impossible. And what he meant was the price. The man wanted $3 million for the entire collection, which was far beyond anything that we couldn't even imagine having raised, let alone be able to offer him. After that, we all had lunch together, and during lunch I excused myself to the restroom at one point and pulled out the paper and pen that I'd stuck in my back pocket and wrote down everything that I'd been able to memorize about the manuscript. And on the basis of that information, I wrote a report to the library that had offered to pay up to $50,000 for the Coptic Codex, telling them that I definitely thought they should buy it. I told them what I've been able to learn about it, but I told them they were going to have to find a lot more money than $50,000. And that was the end of my involvement with the Gospel of Judas Codex until 20 years later.
Disappointed that the sale to the scholars did not go through, Hannah packed his bags and flew to the United States in 1984 in search of anyone who would be willing to take the codex off his hands. Unfortunately for him, no one seemed interested in shelling out the cash, even at his steal of a sale price, $1 million. After 2 failed sale attempts, Hannah gave up on selling the codex and sealed it in yet another safe deposit box in Hicksville, New York, where it would remain and rot for 16 years. Meanwhile, in Zurich, Switzerland, the antiquities dealer Frieda Chakos Nussberger, the same woman whom Perdias had contacted earlier, received a phone call from Greece which led her to purchase leaves of an ancient manuscript. Remembering Hannah's codex, she decided to visit him and inquire about it while she was staying with relatives in Egypt, and Hannah agreed to sell her the codex. The two of them flew to Hicksville, New York, and opened the safe deposit box to find that the codex had begun to disintegrate, splitting apart into thousands of tiny fragments. Despite its deteriorating condition, Frieda purchased the codex on April 4, 2000. After leaving New York, Frieda took the codex to Yale, where the renowned Coptic expert Bentley Layton examined it from April to August of 2000. He identified 2 of the sections as previously discovered texts called the First Apocalypse of James and the Letter of Peter to Philip, but the 3rd section was the never-before-seen Gospel of Judas. Layton was excited to examine the manuscript further, but Yale found the suspicious backstory of the codex's ownership too much of a liability to the good name of the university. So Yale said thanks but no thanks to Frieda's offer to sell them the codex, forcing her to look for a buyer elsewhere. She found her buyer in the Ohio antiquities dealer Bruce Farini, who eagerly agreed to purchase the codex for $2.5 million. Farini got into legal trouble, however, and failed to pay her. This led to a legal battle between the 2 antiquities dealers, which resulted in the manuscript's return to Frieda in Switzerland. Unfortunately, she had no way of knowing if any of the pages were missing, because Farini subjected the tattered codex to his unique methods of preservation, such as the deep freeze treatment, a technique in which you place a priceless ancient manuscript in the freezer in order to separate the pages. As you can imagine, this is about as effective of a preservation technique as throwing the codex in a wood chipper or incinerator. Once the manuscript finally returned to Switzerland, Frieda collaborated with the Maecenas Foundation to restore the manuscript and publish the text. They approached the Swiss Coptic scholar Rudolf Kasser, who agreed to take on the project. On July 1, 2001, Frieda and the Maecenas Foundation revealed the discovery of the Gospel of Judas to the members of the International Coptic Studies Association at their meeting in Paris. Kasser led the presentation, but little did he know that the new manuscript that he was revealing to the world had actually been seen by several of the other people in the room. After the exciting events of the Coptic Conference, Frieda and Kasser returned to Switzerland, where they assembled a team of experts to reconstruct and translate the manuscript. In addition to Kasser, the team included Florence Darber, a papyrus expert, and Gregor Wurst, a Coptic expert who knew his way around digital imaging. Their task was enormous, given the extensive amount of damage that the manuscript had received. It was tattered and torn into a multitude of fragments, which they had to reassemble based on matching up the text. But since the pages were double-sided, the text had to match on both sides of the papyrus page. Describing the difficulty of the task, Kasser claimed that a similar project would be to take a 9 to 10 page document, tear it up into tiny little pieces, throw away half the pieces, and then try to put the rest back together. After 6 long years of painstaking work, the team completed their task, but due to the extensive damage, the text reads like a Mad Libs, with words, phrases, lines, and sometimes whole pages missing. As the team underwent the reconstruction phase, they discovered that some of the pages had been purposefully removed. These missing pages and fragments turned up in places like Oslo, Norway, Springfield, Missouri, and New York.
In 180 AD, a bishop by the name of Irenaeus of Lyon wrote on the detection and overthrow of the so-called Gnosis, combating heresies of his time. Though his 5-volume work is often called Against Heresies in today's world, it can give us a deeper look at who the Gnostics were. In his first book, though he refutes many heresies, he mentions the Gospel of Judas at the end when he says, "Others again declare that Cain derived his being from the power above, and acknowledge that Esau, Korah, the Sodomites, and all such persons are related to themselves. On this account," they add, "they have been assailed by the Creator, yet no one of them has suffered injury, for Sophia was in the habit of carrying off that which belonged to herself." They declare that Judas, the traitor, was thoroughly acquainted with these things, that he alone, knowing the truth as no others did, accomplished the mystery of the betrayal. By him all things, both earthly and heavenly, were thus thrown into confusion, and they produce a fictitious history of this kind, which they style the Gospel of Judas. Do you find yourself stuck in a rut of overused comebacks? Have you been looking for something new to put heretics to shame? Have you spent hours flipping through useless pages as you try to prepare for a social event with your enemies? If you answered yes to any of those questions, look no further. Irenaeus Insults is for you! This book contains every low blow, offense, and slam you need for taking down your opponents. See how many satisfied customers there have already been! Irenaeus and I haven't always agreed, but his insults are nothing but the best. I personally like Gnostics claim to have this special knowledge when really it's just ignorance. I've been a lot of places in this life of mine, but no matter where I've gone, I've learned it's always good to have insults up your sleeve. You have to be ready to slander anyone at any time, and Irenaeus insults are the way to go. I've always had high hopes for Irenaeus, and he hasn't let me down. I can walk into any party of heretics and offend them with just one of many insults. My favorite, Sethian Gnostics are wicked tenants. For one easy payment of $19.95, this book can be yours! If you order within the next 17 minutes, we'll even throw in a second copy for free. What a deal! Call 1-800-666-6669. Don't miss out. Order Irenaeus Insults today! Shipping and handling not included.
The Gospel of Judas begins with a brief explanation that Jesus has appeared on earth and performed wonders for the salvation of humanity. Jesus began to talk about the mysteries of the world, and on occasion did not show himself to his disciples as an adult, but rather as a child. Yeah, we don't know what to make of that. One day, Jesus approaches his disciples and asks them to present the perfect human before him. The only one who could stand before him is Judas Iscariot, out of all people. Even so, Judas cannot look him in the eyes. He says to Jesus,
"I know who you are and whence you have come, from the immortal realm of Barbelo."
That's right, Barbelo. Jesus takes Judas aside, as Jesus will reveal the mysteries of the kingdom, not so that he may go there, but so that he can mourn deeply. Nice guy. Jesus claims that another will take his place, and Judas asks him about the dawn of the great race. Jesus leaves Judas without reply. The next morning, to the disciples' questioning, Jesus responds,
"I went to another great and holy race."
Jesus says that that race is powerful beyond authority and that no mortals will ever join them. Very exclusive. The disciples then tell Jesus that they had a dream. In this dream, they saw a great house with a crowd gathered around an altar and 12 priests. The crowd was fasting, praising, and behaving humbly. But they are also sacrificing women and children, committing murder, engaging in homosexuality, and other crimes in Jesus' name. Jesus interprets the dream, saying that they are the priests receiving the offering on the altar, and the crowd represents the people that they will lead astray. He continues, describing their erroneous ministry and how they will be shamed on the last day. The disciples plead for Jesus to cleanse their sins, but Jesus says,
It's impossible! I was not sent to a corruptible race, but to a mighty and incorruptible race.
So sorry about your luck. After this, Jesus leaves with Judas. Judas tells Jesus that he too has seen a vision. Jesus laughs. That's right, he laughs, and asks,
Why are you so worked up, you 13th diamond?
This has also been interpreted as demon. In the vision, the 12 disciples were stoning Judas, chasing him until he came to an unfathomably large house. Great people were surrounding the house. After revealing the vision, Judas asks,
Teacher, receive me too with these people.
He responds saying,
Your star has led you astray, Judas. For indeed, no mortally born human is worthy to enter the house that you saw. For that is the place kept for the holy ones.
Judas asks why Jesus is setting him apart from that race, and Jesus says,
You will become the 13th, and you will be cursed by the rest of the races, and you will rule over them.
Jesus then dives into a cosmology, beginning with the great invisible spirit, who summoned from a luminous cloud Autogenes, the god of light, along with an attendance of angels. Autogenes created a luminous realm, as if there's any other kind, the first and second light, and countless myriads of angels. Adamus was in the first luminous cloud, which no one has seen and is among all that is called divine. Adamus begot Seth, revealing the imperishable race of Seth. This is the Seth that Jesus was referring to earlier. Jesus continues to explain this cosmology regarding androgynous lights and realms, with 72 lights revealing 360 lights. There are 12 realms with 6 heavens, each making 72 heavens and 72 lights. There are also 360 firmaments within the heavens and countless angelic armies. Within Autogenes' 72 realms is where the first human, presumably Adamus, appears with imperishable powers. In this realm, in a cloud of knowledge, dwelled the angel Elelith. Elelith commanded that 12 angels rule the underworld. From this command came an angel with fire spewing from his face and covered in blood. Some call this angel Nebro, meaning apostate, while others call him Yaldabaoth. Another angel, Saklas, appeared with him. They each created 6 angels, and among with the 12 rulers established the rulers of the underworld. Then Saklas says, Let us create a human being after the likeness of our image. They created Adam and Zoe. It is said that their lives and their children's lives shall be limited. Their time is limited as they receive their kingdom in a limited way, just like their ruler, Yaldabaoth. Judas asks,
Does the human spirit die?
And Jesus replies,
In this way, God commanded Michael to give the spirits of the people to them while they serve, as a loan, but the Great One commanded Gabriel to give spirits to the great kingless race, the spirit and the soul. Therefore, the rest of the souls...
The manuscript breaks off here and picks up again with a continuation of the creation account. God gave knowledge to Adam and those with him to prevent the kings of the underworld to rule over them. Judas asks what those races will do, and Jesus says that the stars are coming to fulfillment. He said that Judas's star will rule over the 13th realm. After this, Jesus laughs, again, explaining that he laughs at the straying stars. Judas says,
Well then, what will those who were baptized in your name do?
And Jesus says, but we don't know what Jesus says, because that manuscript is missing that part. We would have liked to have had that part. The next legible section is of Jesus referring to something that
will wipe out the entire race of earthly Adam.
Jesus claims that those who bear him in the future will be tortured, but no mortal hand will fall on him. He predicts that Judas will do more than them, and that Judas will sacrifice the person who bears Jesus, as Judas's anger has already been kindled. Jesus goes on to describe how the kings are weak and the angels mourn because of their wickedness. The ruler has been wiped out, and the great race of Adam will be exalted as a race exists throughout the realms before heaven and earth. Jesus asks Judas to raise his eyes to the cloud and light within the stars around it, and Judas's star leading them. Judas raised his eyes and entered the luminous cloud. The people on the ground hear a voice. What the voice said was lost from the manuscript. With a commotion among the Jews, chief priests murmured as Jesus went into a guest room to pray. Scribes were plotting to seize him, and they approached Judas to ask what he was doing there, as they knew he was a disciple of Jesus. According to the text, Judas responded the way that they wanted. He took some money and handed him over to them. Thus concludes the Gospel of Judas.
There are multiple references to stars in the Gospel of Judas, but what do stars mean? Jesus is quoted in saying in the Gospel of Judas, "Your star has led you astray, Judas." Does this mean that, according to this manuscript, stars have an influence over us? Astrology seems to have been an influence throughout the ancient world, popularly shown through Plato's work, Timaeus. In his work, it is said that each soul was given a star, and that the goal of one is to eventually return to his star. This reflects the same in the Gospel of Judas, where it is said, "Each of you has his own star." But while Plato viewed stars positively, that whoever conquered their human passions will return to his star of affinity and dwell in blessedness, it seems that stars in the Gospel of Judas have a negative connotation. Stars are capable of leading people astray. But how can stars be viewed as a sentient being? Origen was an early Greek theologian and Bible scholar during the late 2nd and 3rd century. His writings, De Principis, written in 231, were set out to be an ordered statement of the Christian doctrine. His doctrine was written long before the Council of Chalcedon in 451, and therefore his doctrinal beliefs diverged from later orthodoxy. Origen would have been alive during the times platonizing Christians were around, and it can be assumed that his ideas on the nature of stars may have influenced or been related to that of the platonizing Christians. Did Origen view stars as sentient beings? Yes, he did. In his first principles, Origen writes, "For Job appears to assert that not only may the stars be subject to sin, but they are actually not clean from the contagion of it. The following are his words, 'The stars also are not clean in your sight.'" Origen goes on to explain that stars, or planets, were given commandments by God to bestow their splendor on humanity. This includes their revelations. This idea reflects earlier in Plato's Timaeus because the soul is said to imitate the motion of the universe. But if stars are contaminated by sin, like Origen's commentary on Job leads us to believe, then surely they can influence our souls to be led astray.
And fish. What senseless creatures. I mean, they don't even have feet.
Plato, have you heard the latest nonsense people are saying about you?
It seems such vibrations have not yet reached my liver. What is it, faithful student?
You see, Plotinus was a bit of a Plato zealot.
The nerve, the unmitigated...
Now let us be men of reason. It seems something has disturbed your third soul.
You'd be disturbed too if you had to listen to these people.
This is no idle talk. If these people lack wisdom, they lack the key to life eternal. What is it that they say that upsets you so?
Plotinus debated Gnostics frequently, to his great frustration. Impatient with their recurring mysticism, he would berate them relentlessly during his arguments. The worst part is that they think that their God, the great invisible spirit, is the same as our God, the one.
The artificer.
No! Their great invisible spirit isn't even the creator of the universe. That belongs to some dumb evil entity. How their God created an evil counterpart, I'll never know. And neither will they, apparently.
How flawed. Of course the artificer of the universe is perfect, and therefore can only create after his perfect image.
For Plato and Plotinus, God is the one and the supreme artificer of the universe. He modeled the universe after himself and his character. He had to, since nothing existed besides him. Being the only entity in the universe also means that God had nothing and no one to envy, so what he directly creates is perfectly good. Exactly. And how could a world of order come from a being of pure ignorance?
Are you sure they do not speak of the gods, who created on the order of God, so that the world may be less perfect, but good all the same?
The Platonic God decided a universe in which everything was immortal wasn't a good universe, but he couldn't create mortal things because he was the essence of life itself. So he created lesser deities to create Earth and the surrounding planets and stars. Far from the same beings, their creator, this Yaldabaoth, is so corrupted that he's completely ignorant of the deities above him.
How could a deity become so corrupted?
Beats me. This is one of Plotinus's most vehement charges against Gnosticism. He could not see how an evil and ignorant entity could emanate from a wholly good entity, and he never found a sufficient explanation, and was certain that Platonic cosmology was more rational and required fewer assertions than Gnosticism to explain the problem of evil. They think that having an evil creator explains all of the unpleasant things in the world, but that's just ridiculous. If the creator was devoid of all goodness, how could it create things according to good ideal forms? How hard is it to understand that replicas just lose a little purity with every copy? As if evil was an entity at all, we know that evil's just the deficiency of wisdom, not a distinct entity.
Of course. A good God cannot create an evil universe. And you are right, dear scholar. Evil is merely an absence of wisdom. Like a knot cannot exist without a rope, ignorance cannot exist without truth.
Plato and Plotinus didn't believe evil was an actual force, but merely a term to describe the absence of good. More evil actions and characteristics arise as good dissipates. This is how they explained the bad things in the world. Each generation of emanation and creation after the one God contains less divine nature than the generation before it, much like a billiard ball will move with less force than the ball that struck it.
Such blasphemy. It takes fools to follow such a foolish creator. And if this creator is evil, then the world is evil. And where do they find their wisdom?
Gnosis, they call it. Through some work of God's providence, some elect group is given special knowledge that allows them to transcend the evil in the world.
And these people claim they are some special race to receive such knowledge?
Of course they do. Who could be so arrogant as to say that they are favored by God above all others, without any effort, to say that they're therefore greater than the heavenly bodies? They're practically calling themselves gods.
And if they think themselves so pious, surely they present themselves as ethical examples from everyone else.
But they don't. Just as that they believe their gnosis was predestined to them, they think that their fates are set in stone. Not even the most apathetic, immoral lifestyles can prevent the chosen race from ascending to the spiritual realm.
That's barbaric. How can one expect to reach the spiritual realm if they do not think of spiritual things?
According to your philosophy, they won't.
You know, my student, these fools may be reincarnated as fish, the lowest life forms there are. They will swim beneath the earth in repentance.
Speaking of reincarnation, why are you a woman?
Gender blind casting.
Ah. How might this insight into Platonic philosophy help us read the Gospel of Judas? Well, we learned that its underlying philosophy of platonizing Christianity may not be very Christian, and now we know it may not be very Platonist either. Plotinus, arguably Plato's most devoted student at the time, distanced himself from any Gnostic influence, and he wasn't alone among the Neoplatonists. Platonizing Christians expecting endorsement from Plato and Plotinus are like a worker expecting a letter of recommendation from a former employer, even though they were fired for running out the door with the cash register. As a result, we really can't suggest that the Gospel of Judas or its Platonized Christianity has this rational philosophical backing. And this begs the question, if the Gospel of Judas doesn't have the backing of the church or of the academy, who subscribes to its beliefs?
Hello, my name is Angela, and I am a scientist at the Intelligibles Laboratory. Today, I will be explaining the created world of Yaldabaoth. You may be asking, what does Yaldabaoth's world have to do anything with the Gospel of Judas? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Gospel of Judas gives a brief description of the creation account. Now let's explain this account as told in the Apocryphon of John. When Yaldabaoth created the world, he created it in ignorant darkness. There was no light from the invisible realm. When he created, there were 12 authorities, 7 kings, and 7 heavens, not to be confused with the show Seventh Heaven, and there were 7 planets. When he created the 7 planets, there was the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Pluto never had a chance. Yaldabaoth organized everything after the first eon, so that it would be patterned after the incorruptible ones. But he had not seen the incorruptible ones, but he knew about the power that his mother Sophia had given him. Since he did not know the incorruptible ones and did not have complete power, the world when it was created was corrupted. Yaldabaoth said to the authorities with him, "Come, let's create man in our own image so that he may give us light." The authorities began to fashion man, Adam's physical body, creating his bones, his flesh, his marrow, his hair, and the angels began arranging parts properly, like the eyes, the skull, the head, the brain, the ears, the nose, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, that sort of thing. After the angels had finished putting Adam's physical body together, they noticed that he did not move or stir. So 5 luminaries were sent from the realm of Barbelo to persuade Yaldabaoth to breathe life into Adam. After Yaldabaoth breathed life into Adam, he arose and was enlightened. Adam was more intelligent than Yaldabaoth and the authorities that had created him. The authorities were jealous of Adam, and they put him in paradise, saying, "Eat of the fruit," but the fruit was poisonous and would lead to his death. Adam disobeyed the authorities because he knew that the fruit would kill him. Yaldabaoth was jealous of Adam's insight and caused him to go in a deep sleep. And when Adam arose, his mind was sluggish and he wasn't able to discern or understand. To further hinder Adam's power, Yaldabaoth removed part of Adam's power and created another figure in the form of a female, called Eve. By understanding the created world of Yaldabaoth, we have a deeper understanding of the condition of mankind. Mankind was created without light from the invisible realm. Therefore, we are far removed from the One, also referred to as the All. Our goal is to be more like the One. We do this by contemplating and seeking after the One. We are to relinquish emotions like anger, malice, and deceit, for these are part of the corrupted realm, and we're called to be a part of the incorruptible realm. However, there are those who have been led astray by a false spirit, also referred to in the Gospel of Judas by a star. Yet there is hope. We have hope in philosophy and studying and contemplating about the One.
At the beginning of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus singles out Judas and separates him to reveal the mysteries of the kingdom. Judas seems like an awesome guy, right? Well, later on in the text, Judas is telling Jesus about an amazing vision in which he saw a great house filled with great people. Judas is amazed and says,
"Teacher, receive me too with these people."
And Jesus responds,
"Your star has led you astray, Judas. For indeed, no mortally born human is worthy to enter the house that you saw, for that is the place kept for the holy ones.
The great and holy race is a constant theme throughout the Gospel of Judas. But even though Jesus singles him out, Judas Iscariot does not appear to be a part of it. If Judas is not worthy to ascend these realms, then who is? Another ancient text tells us the epic tale of Zostrianus' ascent through these eons. If you're wondering what eons are, they're basically representing the Earth and its sublunar atmosphere. The story begins with a depressed Zostrianus wandering through the wilderness. He's deeply troubled and gloomy because of the feeble-mindedness of those surrounding him. No one else knows the truth. To rid himself of such a burden, Zostrianus seeks out wild beasts and a violent death by their claws. Before he can find any wild beasts, however, an angel of eternal light and knowledge comes to him. The angel says to Zostrianus, "Why have you gone mad just as those who do not know the truth? Don't you know that you are a chosen person and will be saved? Come and transcend these realms. You will return to proclaim a living grace and save those who are worthy." Suddenly, a luminous cloud appears. Zostrianus eagerly embarks with the angel upon the great luminous cloud. But wait a minute. This is not really how it looked. You see, Zostrianus couldn't bring his body with him on this journey through the eons. Mortal bodies cannot transcend to the immaterial. Zostrianus leaves his molded bodily form upon the earth, and several glories come down and watch over it for him. Glories are some sort of supernatural helper. Zostrianus ascends the eons, learns about eternal beings, and is baptized several times. Several being at least 20, but the baptisms are a complicated process and it is difficult to discern the exact number. After receiving enlightenment, Zostrianus descends back down to his earthly form. Following his experience, Zostrianus could not keep silent. He preaches to the holy seed of Seth. We believe this holy seed of Seth is the great holy race which Jesus told Judas about. Zostrianus transcends the 13 eons that only those of the great race could enter. Zostrianus is accepted into the great race, unlike Judas, who is denied.